What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. And today is going to be another UX day in the life. Now it's the beginning of the week. I'm ready to be productive. I'm ready to get into it, get some work done, and yeah, just hit the ground running. Now this week is kind of a slow week, but I got two projects that I'm working on this week. One is a past project that's entering a new phase, so picking that work back up again to go over some designs that I had previously created and see how they work, what doesn't work, and to be able to make improvements to that. Now the other one is a little bit more of a future forward project. Right now I'm working on the most immediate state, the MVP, but I need to have a little leeway in the design for how the experience can progress in the future. So those two things I'm going to be tackling this week. I also have quite a few meetings. Today is my busiest meeting day, but I have a few other meetings sprinkled throughout the week to discuss some other projects, meet with design team members, meet with cross-functional partners and shareholders, and yeah, I'm about to get into it, check my calendar, see what's up for today, and we're gonna get into it. All right, so looking at my calendar today, it looks like we got the usual suspects. We have our weekly staff meeting, more so the design team, the larger design team. And then I have my more focused design team meeting stand up today. These are cool, pretty low key. It's just meeting with my fellow designers, celebrating wins from last week, updating people on what we're working on this week, and really just kind of easing into the day. So nothing too strenuous. They're not too long, so I'm gonna go ahead and dive in. But looking at the rest in the calendar, it looks like I'm gonna be touching on quite a few topics between what I'm working on, what other designers are working on, having conversations with my stakeholders, cross-functional partners. So looks like it's going to be quite a bit of context switching today. Speaking of context switching, that's going to be the topic for today's video. Context switching, and I'll even throw in ambiguity, the ins and outs of that and how they kind of affect your role as a designer or my role as a designer. Now keep in mind, this is all just from my perspective, so it may be different for you all out there. It may be different for people on my personal team. So yeah, definitely just giving you my perspective on, how I deal with those two topics throughout the day. And maybe I could share some helpful tips for you all. I'm gonna go ahead and dive into these first two meetings and just kind of get into it. And I'm gonna check in with y'all in a bit. All right, so we knocked out those first two meetings. Really good news, my third meeting is canceled. Now it's not good news because I didn't want to have it or anything, because I actually did want to speak with some of my engineering partners and kind of get some clarity on if the designs I provided were, feasible in all areas. If not, what areas of the designs needed to change. But since we're not having that meeting, it actually freed up time on my calendar for me to just sit down, get into my designs, make some tweaks, make some edits, and really, get into that flow state and deep work. One big thing about meetings is that, they kind of interrupt that flow state. They kind of interrupt that, just that focus time. But I digress. I'm gonna get into that a little bit later. I got a few hours before lunch starts, so I'm gonna go ahead and try to make some progress on these projects. So I'll check in with y'all a little bit later. All right, y'all. So let's talk a little bit about the topics for today. So, two topics. One, context switching, and two, ambiguity. Now, these are two things that commonly come up in this UX design profession. Ambiguity is more along the lines of the problem solving that you're doing. I've seen it happen in multiple stages of a project, everything from the discovery phase of a project where you're trying to narrow down problems. You're hearing a lot of symptoms like what's wrong with the experience, and then you got to go and figure out which is the problem that you should be solving. You have to understand all the little nuances of specific problems, and it's ambiguous to start. And it's like the whole process of like the exploratory research, talking to people, understanding workflows, is to narrow down that ambiguity. And it's kind of a big task to take on. So it's definitely something you need to take your time with and to be patient with as you're going through that process. Now, the other area of ambiguity is when you're getting design feedback. So you present designs, regardless of if it's to other designers or if it is to your cross-functional partners, and they're giving you feedback, but it doesn't quite get to the crux of what changes need to be made. It's a little bit more vague, so to speak, or it's a little bit more phrased in the form of a question. It's like, well, have you thought about this scenario? Or have you thought about this scenario? A lot more open-ended, and it's a lot more ambiguous. Sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, y'all, it can be a little annoying. I have to be honest. Now, take this all with a grain of salt, because this is all my personal opinions. This is just my point of view, my perspective. But a lot of times, you know, you might be under tight timelines, and sometimes the ambiguity kind of takes up a lot of that time. And when you get the ambiguous feedback or more open-ended feedback, it's good if you have the time. Sometimes you want very pointed feedback so you have a clear direction of which direction to head in once you get that feedback. Some tips I would give for you all out there who may be going through the same thing as well, which I bet you probably are, is one, in the early stages, the discovery phases, just talk to as many people as possible, like people who are engaging in these workflows that use your experience, all the necessary stakeholders. Ask lots of questions, lots of clarifying questions. It could be for something as little as nomenclature to something as big as functionality and perception and things like that, and really just try to understand the crux of the symptoms that you're hearing so that you can properly diagnose the problems that you need to solve in your experience. Now, on the feedback side, again, ask very direct, pointed questions in feedback. Let the people who are giving feedback, let them know the type of feedback you're looking for. Let them know where you are in the process. Let them know your timelines. Give them all the information they need, and then be very diligent about going after the feedback that you're looking for. And so with more pointed questions, with more being more direct, you can kind of alleviate some of the ambiguity. I think it's always going to kind of be there, but it helps. Trust me, it helps. Now, the second topic I wanted to talk about is context switching. Now, context switching has different levels of severity depending on the size of company you're at. If you're at a smaller company, you may not have as much context switching. But if you're at a larger company, I feel like context switching is just more prevalent. The reason is because you can be working on multiple projects, and then you're meeting with some of your design partners on some of the projects they're working on because it affects your work, and so you have to understand their projects to understand your projects, and you have to get feedback on that. You may have auxiliary things like company events, company training, career building training. You may have things like setting goals for the year and having manager conversations and things like that on your progress and how you're doing in your role. And then there's all like the little day-to-day, daily things where you're getting pinged throughout the day, Slack messages, Jira comments, Jira mentions, Asana mentions, and it really just pulls your attention away from some of the primary tasks that you're working on. And so as a designer, that can be tough because I don't know about y'all, but for me, it's super important for me to have that moment where I can just have like a nice flow state where I can just zero in on a problem for like 1 to 2 hour chunks where I could just be focused on that specific problem that I'm trying to solve. No external things just vying for my attention. So the major tip I would give in order to alleviate context switching or to better mitigate context switching is for those times where you really want to focus, you really want to dive into your projects, anything that surfaces a notification, turn it off. Just turn it off, close it. That could be Slack, that could be Jira, that could be Outlook, that could be Asana, that could be silencing or putting your phone on vibrate, it could be silencing notifications or reducing the vibrations on your watch. Everything. Just get into that flow state, because that flow state is nice. Once you get into it and once you're in your zone and you got that momentum going, you don't want it to be interrupted. And so I think it's really important to set that boundary. Yes, you do want to be able to check your messages periodically throughout the day in case anything urgent needs to be addressed, but really set those times of focused, deep work, because that's super important. Because at the end of the day, you have deliverables, and you can't like be having conversations all day, even meetings. Like those days where you have all day meetings, those can be exhausting. It takes a lot of your headspace. It takes a lot of your headspace between the context switching and ambiguity in those meetings. And, it can be a lot. On those days when you know you're going to have all day meetings, I would encourage you to be proactive. If you know there's going to be a day where you have meetings all day, look at the day after and the day before it. And if those days have chunks where you can really get work done, really try to go hard on getting that focus time during those days in order to mitigate the execution time loss. That's the right term for it. So make sure that you're doing that, and just being mindful of your calendar and your time. I hope that helped you all. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much, but I'm curious how y'all manage y'all's time as UX designers out there. What are some of the tactics that you employ in order to set that dedicated deep work time? And go ahead and drop that down in the comments. We can compare notes. That's about all I have for today. I'm gonna go ahead and let y'all go, but go ahead and drop a like on this video. Subscribe if you haven't already, if you find this content valuable, and I will catch y'all on the next one. I'm gonna go ahead and get back to work. Later.